stewardship is because this church has a mission. It is not only a local mission, it is a worldwide mission. If it was a local mission, Adventism would have stayed on the east coast of America, or probably Adventism would have stayed only in America. But this church has received from God a universal mandate to bring the everlasting gospel, all language, to all tribes, and to all people. That's why stewardship is so important. Last night, when we left Eldoret to come here to Kisumu, my colleagues and I, we had the privilege of stopping at Baraton University. We stopped there for a very important purpose. We wanted to visit three missionary. We went to visit one, let me say it right. We went to visit one missionary family, and we ended up visiting three missionary families. And do you know that these missionaries, they are there because they are sent by the world church? And around the world today, we have around 500 missionary families. When we visited these families yesterday, it reminded us, Pastor Lucas, Pastor Edison, and myself, that what we are doing in stewardship can make a difference. Because these families, one of these families, they are there for 14 years. Another one, 12 years. Another one, 9 years. They left their country, they left everything. But for that to be possible, for us to send missionaries from one corner of the world to another, it's because our members are giving. Our members are giving. I would like to say thank you. I would like to say thank you because your offerings, your time is contributing to this worldwide missionary movement. We need a worldwide missionary movement. And for that to happen, we need a worldwide missionary, a worldwide giving system. If our church was only a local church, you just give to your local church. You make some donations, it will be good. But because our church is a world movement, we are part of a global mission. Our time, our offerings, they are participating in fulfilling this global mission. In my next presentation, I will dwell more on this relationship between stewardship and mission. And to do that, I will choose as my title, Taking the Challenge. Who will take the challenge? Who will take the challenge of the day? Life, as you know, is full of challenges. Challenges about family life, challenges about health, challenges about raising children, challenges about employment, education, security, all types of challenges. But one thing is true, personally and collectively, if we want to move forward, we need to take the challenges. You may have your own challenge. They are real, they are most probably big. But as a church, as God's church in this generation, we share a common challenge. Do you know what it is? Accomplishing God's mission. Those living in the US, they have this challenge. Those believers in Europe, in Australia, in Asia, in Africa, in Western Kenya, we all share this challenge, accomplishing God's final mission. And my question to us today, who will take the challenge? Who will take the challenge of accomplishing God's final mission? To talk about that, let me invite you to go to the Bible. We go to the Bible. We go to the Bible in the book of Samuel. First Samuel chapter 17. In First Samuel 17, Israel is facing a challenge. And the text tells us three things about the challenge. Firstly, the nature of the challenge. Secondly, the ineffective reaction to the challenge. And thirdly, the profile of a successful challenge taker. Three things: the nature of the challenge, the ineffective reaction, and the profile of the successful challenge taker. Let's talk briefly about the nature of the challenge. You know this story very well. I like to share biblical passages that are already well known, but to try to dig a little bit further into them. In First Samuel chapter 17, verse 1, listen what the text is saying. Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and were gathered in Soko, which belonged to Judah. They encamped between Soko and Izikah in Ephes Dammim. This text is telling us about the challenge. It is telling us about the challenge that Israel is facing. But this text is telling us more than that. The text is telling us that the challenge that Israel is facing, these are the Philistines. But the text is saying something. The Philistines, who have always been a challenge to Israel, they are not outside Israel anymore. The challenge that usually is outside is now an inside challenge. The challenge has crossed the border. The challenge is now inside the territory of Israel. When you have a challenge that is outside your life, outside your family, outside your church, you talk about the challenge. Hey, so and so is having such challenge. But when the challenge is inside, it is completely different, isn't it? You don't talk anymore about it. You feel it in your flesh. You experience it. This is exactly what is happening. The Philistines, they are not only on the news. The Philistines have become the daily reality of Israel. This was the challenge of the day. But when I kept reading the text, the Bible text tells me more about the nature of the challenge. When I read verse 4 and 5, the text says, and a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. So King Saul and his army, they were used to go to battle. In the time of ancient Israel, there was a season of the year that was coming every year, that this is the time for war. They are used to go to war. That was part of what they do as soldiers, as an army. But now things are completely different. When they go to war, they usually fight soldiers against soldiers. But this time, the challenge is different. They did not go out to fight soldiers against soldiers. The text says there was a giant on the battlefield. In other words, the nature of the challenge was beyond normal. The challenge was not the routine challenge. The challenge was not the one that they were used to, but it was a gigantic challenge. Have you come across such challenges? You have some challenges. You miss the bus. You have the tire of your car that burst. These are normal, routine challenges. But have you ever experienced a gigantic challenge in your life, in your existence? When I keep reading this text, the Bible text tells me more about the nature of the challenge. When I go to verse 16, the text says, "And the Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening." Oh, this is what we call a persistent challenge. The challenge is here to stay. The challenge is not going anywhere. I'm sure the children of Israel, the soldiers in Saul's army, and probably Saul himself, he said, "Oh, we hope tomorrow Goliath is not coming again." But Goliath was there. Goliath was there in the morning and in the evening. After some few days, they were hoping and praying, "We hope Goliath will get tired. We hope Goliath will lose his voice." But Goliath was still there, shouting to them, shouting over them. After 1 week, Goliath was still there. After 2 weeks, Goliath was still there. After 1 month, Goliath was still there. 39 days, Goliath was still there. 40th days, Goliath was still there. This is what we call a chronic challenge. This is a persistent challenge. You have prayed about it. You have fasted about it, and you desire all your will that the challenge will go away, but the challenge is not going anywhere. When I keep reading the text, it tells me more about the challenge that Israel had to face. This is what is written in verse 8 and 9. The text says, "Then he stood, Goliath, and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, 'Why have you come out to line up for battle? Oh, am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul?'" And the text continues and says, choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me." They were used to fight army against army, one group against another group. But now Goliath is changing the rule of the battle. Goliath is not saying, "Let's fight army against army." Goliath is saying, "Choose a man." In other words, Goliath is saying, this challenge needs a man. This challenge needs someone to make a stand. This challenge, we won't take it by fighting army against army. We will take it if there is a man who choose to stand. Many times, when we have to face challenges, if we are not too brave, we hide behind others. We hide behind our family. We hide behind our leaders. We hide behind our church. And we say, okay, let them go. Let them go. I will just follow from behind. But this challenge on that day, it was an individual challenge. This challenge on that day, it was a personal challenge. Brothers and sisters, when I look at the challenge that Israel had to face, it looked quite similar to our challenge today. It looked quite similar to our challenge of accomplishing the final mission. This challenge of accomplishing the final mission, it is an inside challenge. Do you agree with me? It is not only a challenge for people out there, it is a challenge right here in Kisumu. This challenge of accomplishing God's final mission, it is a gigantic challenge. How are we going to reach so many people? How are we going to proclaim the everlasting gospel to all those people around us? This is just beyond what we can imagine, what we can think of accomplishing. And this challenge is a persistent challenge. You know that. You preach today, you run an evangelistic campaign this month. Unfortunately, you are not done. Next month, you have to come again. You witness today, you share today, you give a Bible study this month, you finish baptizing someone. The challenge is not done. The challenge is a persistent challenge until Christ come again. But above all, the challenge of accomplishing the final mission, it is a personal challenge. That's why the church has developed total member involvement. Because this challenge cannot be taken by only the group of pastors. This challenge cannot be taken only by the church as a whole. This challenge requires a man. This challenge requires a woman. This challenge requires a young person to make a stand. And my question to you this morning, who will take the challenge? Who will take the challenge that is inside? Who will take the challenge that is gigantic? Who will take the challenge that is persistent? Who will take the challenge that requires a man and a woman to stand up? When I keep reading the Bible, I learn about the reaction of Saul. The reaction of Saul and of his army. And the text says they had some reaction. Let's read again what is written in verse 2 of 1 Samuel 17. The text says, and Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. What we learn from this passage is the following. Saul and his army, they had the structure. Yes, they had an army. Saul had an organization. The army was well organized. And in this army, all protocols were observed. The army had a general, officers, soldiers. All one was filling the right rank. And the text even says they knew how to manage. Interesting. Structure was there, organization was there, regulations were there, policies were there, but they failed to take the challenge. I would like to talk with you today. Church organization is essential for unity and order. Church policies are important to bind us together, to move as an army. But I will make this statement today. Church organization alone, church structures alone, church policies alone are not sufficient to take the challenge of the day. Saul, he had the structure. He had all the organizations, all the regulations of an army, but they failed to take the challenge. But there was something else. There was something else about Saul. The text says in verse 11, when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. And verse 24, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. King Saul and his men, they were adopting what I call the escapist approach. They were not facing the challenge. They decided to turn their back to Goliath, thinking that if they turn their back to him, Goliath will go away. Instead of facing the challenge, they choose to turn their back to the challenge. Is it possible that we too sometimes we refuse to confront the challenge? Is it possible that we too sometimes we just spend time congratulating ourselves, commending ourselves without facing reality, without addressing the real problem? And one of the problems that we are currently facing as a church is total member involvement. Total member involvement in doing mission and total member involvement in supporting mission. Unfortunately, this mission is going forward the way it is going forward by only a small group of people doing mission, by only a small group of people supporting mission. If we don't look at reality, if we don't focus at the problem and try only to congratulate ourselves, we will face a bigger problem in the future. That was the problem of Israel. That was the problem of the army of King Saul. They were not, they were turning their back to Goliath, and Goliath was still there. Goliath was still there. Goliath was not going anywhere. There is another thing. There is another ineffective reaction. You know, in verse 25, it says, so the men of Israel say, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. And verse 30, then he turned from him toward another and said the same thing. And these people answered him as the first ones did. That was a terrible situation inside the army of King Saul. They were only talking about the challenge. They were talking about that challenge. They were saying Goliath is the challenge. Yes. They knew what to do with the challenge. We need to kill Goliath. And they even knew about the reward. If you kill Goliath, you will be exempted from tax. You will marry the daughter of the king. And they kept talking and talking and talking and talking about the challenge. But there was no one to take the challenge of the day. Dear leaders, dear leaders, if we are not careful as a church, we can also fall in the same problem. Just talking and talking and talking. In committees, in meetings, in church boards, and elsewhere. We talk and we talk and we talk without really addressing the challenge. I would like to challenge you today. I would like to challenge you today to move away from these ineffective ways of taking the challenge. Do not depend exclusively on organization and structure. They are good, but men are those who take the challenge, not the organization, not the structure. Do not run away from the challenge. Be courageous to face the challenge in your church, to face the challenge in your district. Know about the challenge. How many people are participating in my district, in my church? How many are faithful? How many are partnering in God's mission? Know about the challenge. And please, let us not only be talkers about the challenge.